Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 71. And this episode, Matt and I wanted to talk a bit about fan-created content because with video games being as long-running of a medium as it is, a lot of folks who work in the industry today started out as fans. And some people are still in that, I guess, fan category, which is a bit hard, bit indistinct in where the boundaries begin and end. And we wanted to talk a bit about some of the projects, some of the official games that started as fan games, or some other favorite fan things that we have found.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think talking about fan games, my brain immediately goes to Flash Games and Newgrounds, which was, for you youngins, a website dedicated to Flash animation and Flash games that don't really have a place on the internet anymore, as most browsers have evolved past Flash and those Flash plugins, which is a type of tool that browsers used and animators used. But like my earliest interaction, I think, with fan games was probably Alien Hominid on Newgrounds, which was made, I don't know if they were behemoth back then when they were on Newgrounds. I'd have to double check. I don't remember. But most people now would know that same company for games like Alien Hominid's official console release, Castle Crash. What else? They had two other games after Castle Crashers, but I'm blanking on them.
Battle Block Theater and Pit
yes.
People.
That's right, yes. Pit People being the only one I haven't played, but I've loved all of those other games. Castle Crashers, probably my favorite multiplayer, side-scrolling, beat-em-up game that I think I've ever played. And I think recently got a re-release on the Switch and some newer consoles, too,
yes,
if I'm not
it did.
mistaken. Yeah,
it got an HD or I got an updated re-release.
But it was something that started as just a clicking browser-based game back in the day. And, you know, the evolution from fan creator to indie studio is definitely, I think, faster now and more easily attained, I would suppose, just because there's more access.
Possible. Yeah.
But back then, I would have never thought that a game that I like playing in a browser would eventually be something I'm playing on consoles and phones and would evolve into this company that's released a ton of games that I really like.
Yeah. The fact that Alien Hominid, I remember it was released in 2004, and yeah, it was definitely a game where I remember being like, oh my God, that was I never played the Newgrounds original. I was familiar with Newgrounds, but that thing of, this is a Newgrounds game that's going to be on official systems? Oh my God, I have to play this.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, it's a Metal Slug Contra-like game? Sign me up. And it was great.
And it was so unheard of back then, too, right? Like these fan releases that, you know, especially considering a lot of fan releases back then got shut down pretty easily. I mean, even in the years after, like Kaizo Mario, which I think we can unofficially blame/thank for Super Mario Maker, is like this guy just decided to create impossibly difficult, obnoxiously hard Mario levels, and people took to the challenge, but it had nothing to do with Nintendo. It was just a fan creation that spread around the internet like wildfire, mostly because in the early days of YouTube, people loved laughing at how insane these levels were.
Right. Yeah, you'd watch, there's so many videos of like whether scripted narration or real-time narration of people not beating the level on the first try, but like, all right, I'm going to try this, and oh, there's a block there to stop me. Or I'm going to go over here, and oh, that's not a real platformer. I'm going to go over here, and oh, geez. And one could also, while Kaizo Mario and its ilk are, yeah, I would definitely say there's a bit of a through line to Mario Maker. It also is a through line to games like I Want to Be the Guy, which is also still considered a fan game, but is kind of the notion of everything is out to kill you and there are spikes everywhere taken to the nth degree. And whether I Want to Be the Guy owes anything to Mario hacks, Super Meat Boy is a game that is an official title that there is some back and forth in terms of fan game influencing official game influencing fan game as well. And those are some of my favorite things in terms of fan game stuff. And I want to get into it a little later, but the idea when fan developed content leads to new franchises, and even into new genres. Because I think the idea of the spikes everywhere, everything is trying to kill you kind of platforming genre, the platformer hell, which Kaizo Mario and so many other sorts and kinds are definitely a part of.
For sure. And I think it's really interesting when we look at these fan games that grow into something else. Also, it's like other modes of content and creation and media. You know, there are tons of fan filmmakers who then, of course, went on to make actual films, get budgets, direct things. You know, people making podcasts who get picked up to script actual TV shows and other things. And not that the other things they were doing before that are lesser than. It's just that it because of the access of the internet now and how connected we are, for better or worse, it allows some people to jump up the ranks in a different way just because of the access we have to tools that we didn't have when we were younger. And just also the way communication works now via email and Twitter and other things, you can reach out to people that you might not have been able to before, get audiences that you could never get before.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things is certainly whether you are being an auteur style video game creator or some other part of the team, creating fan content is still an important piece of your portfolio. Artists some often go back and forth on the idea of, well, I've drawn a lot of stuff and I've developed techniques and done this stuff, but a lot of what's in my portfolio is fan stuff. And it's like, well, you know what? You don't have to get rid of all of it. I am not a visual artist myself, so I may be misrepresenting a lot of people's opinions here. But from what I have gleaned, there's a sense of like, okay, you don't have to have everything, but having it in there shows what you can make and shows what you can do. Something I can speak to is composers. And one in particular that I think of when we decided on tackling this topic, one that I wanted to talk about is Jake Kaufman.
Oh, sure, of course.
Yeah, Jake Kaufman is quite an excellent composer for video games. I mean, he composed the music for, I guess, the unofficial favorite game of Fun and Games, Shovel Knight.
Right, yeah.
And sweet shovel injustice. And the thing is, I became aware of Jake Kaufman, not as Jake Kaufman, but as Virt, V-I-R-T, which was his handle on both VGMix and the time when he did submit to Overclocked Remix,
right.
Both sites that host rearrangements and remixes of video game music. And I became aware of him because he did a mix of Dr. Mario music that was just effing spectacular. Like, I still get it stuck in my head, and I haven't listened to it in over 10 years. Maybe 15 years. Because it has been a long time since he was ever on Overclocked Remix. Right. And this is in the days when I had to download between 2 and 6 in the morning. Anyway, and I looked up a little bit of his dossier and his background, and he just sort of, this is stuff he was working on, and at one point he just went, look, I'm gonna dive headfirst into composition and arrangement for video games. And he started getting work through, and I imagine a good deal of his portfolio was just remixes and rearrangements at that point, while I'm sure he also was composing. But I can't help but think that his rearrangements were also a strong part of his portfolio when he got his first, Game Boy Color project. Because I think he started on Game Boy Color games.
He did. The first game it looks like that he officially composed for was the Game Boy Color version of Q*bert. And like I pulled up his video game list, and like I hadn't realized how prolific he's been in a very short amount of time.
He worked for WayForward for a while. I think he did most of WayForward's games. That's Mighty Switch Force, that's Shantae, that's a lot.
But he's also the composer for DuckTales Remastered, which I had no idea.
Yes.
And all of that is just remixes of the original DuckTales music from the Nintendo game. Like his remix of the Moon theme, which is inarguably, officially the best song on that entire soundtrack, is just unbelievable. But yeah, I mean, but he's also done random stuff too. Like he was the composer and sound designer for Blood Rain Betrayal, a game I don't think anybody played.
Right.
You
he did a Contra game. He did a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. He has lived our childhood dreams.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And like, but even random stuff like Pets, Cats 2 or CSI Dark Motives, like he's just all over the place. But that's pretty awesome to see how diverse he is. I mean, of course, as we said earlier, my favorite thing he's ever done is Shovel Knight and all the things associated with Shovel Knight. But like, there are games here that I know I've played that I had no idea that he had worked on. But thinking about it, I can hear the similarities for sure.
Yeah, and just as you mentioned, DuckTales Remastered, there wasn't necessarily we need a composer to create new music. We need somebody who can take the existing music and make it dance.
Yeah.
And he's proven that. Even before he started getting paid to do it, he proved he could be amazing at that.
What's really interesting is also he's, for the first time ever, being the music producer for a game because he's working on Cyber Shadow, which is being released by Yacht Club but is not being developed by Yacht Club. It's just being published by them, but he's the music producer for that, which is pretty neat to get to that level where you're overseeing a project like that.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see success stories like that, to see people where it's like, look, it could be one in a million, but yeah, sometimes dedicated fans they become the next generation. They become the next part of the team that brings their ideas, brings the things they love, brings all of that into the development of new titles. Now, I don't know how well Jake Kaufman's compositions would be allowed to shine through on like AAA titles. Not because I don't think he could do it, but because what's great is he's gotten to be very prolific, and he's gotten to work on some very notable titles. And a lot of them would almost be called indie titles. I'm not sure about Blood Rain, but in a weird way, they kind of are. So when you have a team of hundreds and hundreds, you can follow a guy, a girl, you could follow a specific person, and it's like, oh, they're part of that team. What of them is in this game now?
Yeah.
I have a friend who they have a relative who does animation for Disney. And it's the kind of thing where, their name is somewhere in the credits. And a lot of the time it's, well, I got to watch how the grass is animated because that's most of what he does. Grass and water. He got a lot to do on Moana. But but yeah, it's that kind of like, what of them is in this? But Jake Kaufman is someone who you've gotten to see a lot of him. You've gotten to hear a lot of him and the things he does, which is great.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like looking at people who come from fan scenes and then grow beyond. I think one of the most famous, I guess well known in the indie scene at least, is Toby Fox, who started with just a hack for the Halloween hack for Earthbound, and then built stuff out of it. I mean, Undertale, one of the most famous indie games for sure in the last decade. He is essentially like has its roots in Earthbound. A lot of the design, the battles, the gameplay, the music, a lot of it is rooted in that. But like for Undertale and Deltarune, he is the writer, composer, director, designer, and programmer for those games. But not only that, he's gone on to compose for other games, and even he was a guest composer on Pokemon Sword and Shield, and he was the composer for Little Town Hero, which was Game Freak's lesser successful game that came out before, but in between Pokemon games, which was their original IP that they released last year. But he also did a special arrangement of Megalovania for Undertale when they released the Sans costume. He's done a ton of really interesting stuff, but he's someone who is known on the internet for a long time because of his work doing music for the webcomic Homestuck, and then just doing a ton of fan hacks for Earthbound, long before he did any official releases or indie releases under his own steam.
Yeah. And also, Megalovania is such a wonderful object lesson in you don't have to leave behind ideas.
Yeah.
And I mean that in the best possible way. You can look up the evolution of Megalovania because it was the final boss music for that Halloween hack of Earthbound, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so, yes.
I think that was its first incarnation. And while it had a lot of It had the main melodic motif. It had a lot of elements to it. But you can find like 10-minute videos where it's like, all right, here's where it was here. Here's where it showed up again. Like 3 or 4 versions before it was in Undertale. And then, and now there's the version that is on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate.
Yeah.
It is a song that was on a Earthbound hack, which is, you know what? That is an absolute example of they're not going to release it in America? Fine. I'll make my own with blackjack and hookers kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think what's really interesting also is Undertale is one of those few games that, even though it's been out for 5 years, I'm still so hesitant to spoil anything about it. Because it's one of those games that was created, and I think seeing the evolution of Megalovania speaks to that as well. It's a game that was created from a place that not a lot of games are. Clearly, Toby Fox put everything he had into that game. It was a painstaking process for him because he literally did everything. Everything was made by him.
He had a little bit of artistic help, but that's about it.
But it's one of those things where it's just so different from other games that, like, yes, it's an RPG. At its core, I can say it's a JRPG, but that even still sells it short because it's not just a JRPG. In the same way that Deltarune Chapter 1 is not just an RPG, and that one's free. Anyone can play that. He released the first chapter for free. What's funny to me is that besides those 2 projects that are wholly his, he's a composer everywhere else. And I think it's interesting to me that usually it's one way or the other, right? Like most composers are just composers or work within music somehow, whether they're a producer, a designer, whatever, but it's usually within the same realm. And for Toby Fox, it seems like he was for the most part a composer, especially in his professional non-fan career. Not that fan careers can't be professional, I guess, but you know what I mean, like working for others.
Oh, yeah.
But yet the 2 things that he released under his steam, he did everything for the most part. And that's really fascinating to me because you don't see a lot of creators in the space right now doing that. Usually they do one thing, whether they're a director or a composer or a writer or a programmer, maybe do 1 or 2 of those things. But the fact that for both Deltarune and Undertale, he's doing everything is kind of amazing.
Yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, Earthbound is also an example. I mean, the Mother series is an example of something where the guiding force behind it is not your usual fare in terms of the director, the designer, the lead writer on the Mother series, Shigesato Itoi, is a copywriter. And not in a sense of like, oh, he writes for video games. Just that one. He's editor-in-chief of his own website, which translates to Almost Daily Itoi News. The only video game he really created outside of Earthbound was a bass fishing game with his name on it. I'm always very aware of him because he also works on creating this daily journal, Hobonichi, that I found out about through like a video game site that I order every year, and it is the most beautiful goddamned thing. So it's just like the Earthbound guy makes this really good journal. It's more like this really good writer guy made Earthbound.
Right.
So it's almost appropriate that Undertale is one where it's like this really cool composer guy made this really wild game.
Yeah, and I think it again, I don't know that something like that could happen in the way that it does if we didn't have access to the technology that we do. I mean, talking about fan games also, and I think this is something that along the lines of what you wanted to bring up, if we look at Christian Whitehead and Headcanon Studios.
He was he was kind of next bullet point. I did want to make a brief mention of Danny Baranowski, who is another video game composer who started off in like the overclocked remix scene and everything else under the name DB. He's been Danny B. He works under DB Soundworks. He's worked on The Binding of Isaac, Super Meat Boy, Crypta the Necro Dancer. He's another one that is probably has a great fan music portfolio that, man, did he make good. But let's move on to Christian Whitehead.
So I mean, the reason I bring up Christian Whitehead is because I honestly had never heard of him until I played the re-release of Sonic CD, because Sonic CD was one of my favorite Sonic games growing up, but I never owned it. I always played it at a friend's house. I never had a Sega CD, and so when
Most of us didn't.
Right, and so when it got re-released on the as a standalone item on the download stores of whatever platforms it was, I think it was the Xbox 360 generation, I was so excited to finally have it, and I kept seeing Christian Whitehead, and I was like, who is Christian Whitehead? I don't recognize this name. And who he is, for those who don't know, is someone who for many years was known online for making incredible Sonic the Hedgehog fan games, like original levels, original music, original themes.
He created an entire engine. He basically made a Mario Maker engine for Sonic.
Yeah. And it was insane, and he was known really well for doing that, to the point where Sega found out, and instead of shutting it down, when they started to re-release Sonic CD, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, they needed help porting it, especially to consoles and to mobile devices, and so they hired him to help do that, which is unheard of. It was, at least at that time. Usually, when a big company like that finds out that you're aping something of theirs, they shut it down. They don't want you touching it. But his expertise with diving into these games on his own, maybe even deeper than tons of folks at Sonic Team, earned the respect of Sega, and they wanted him to work with them.
I believe part of it was he had made a proof of concept of Sonic CD running on an iPhone.
Yes.
Like, but from Mr. Whitehead's own words, he spent about a year trying to convince Sega to let him do this. Like, please let me do this officially.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but you're right. Regardless of the steps he took, that kind of from above approval and even like uplifting into official project was certainly at the time unheard of, and nowadays is still a very sparse occurrence.
For sure. And what's really amazing, though, is after all of that, after working to help bring these retro Sonic games to other platforms, Sega in 2017 was developing 2 Sonic games, a 3D Sonic game where you could create your own original character, which we've talked about before on the podcast, and something called Sonic Mania, which was a return to 2D Sonic, sprite-based 2D Sonic, and they hired him, as well as Pagoda West Games and Hyperkinetic, to make this game. And the story of Sonic Mania in the narrative of the game is Dr. Robotnik gets his hands on a gem that kind of rewrites time and space, and you replay through older Sonic levels as well as brand new original Sonic levels. And they let this team develop that game from the ground up, rebuilding these levels, the music, everything. It was all old new. None of it was ports of the original stuff. It was all designed in a way to evoke the old stuff, but it was all brand new within a platform and a format that we grew up loving.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable. I'm pretty sure also this was similar to what they did, or to what Christian Whitehead did with the Sonic 2 re-release, and we even got a teaser of what Sonic Mania would be, in that in the Sonic 2 re-release, they turned a very common choke point in one of the levels into a dummied out secret level.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, and I'm going to look this up for just a moment so I can get all the area names right. I didn't grow up with a Sega Genesis. I would always play it at people's houses, so I can see all of the levels in my head. But
yeah, I grew up with a Sega Genesis, and that's why Sonic is still one of my favorite game franchises, even with all its ups and downs, because I grew up playing those games all the time.
Yes, and so way back in the days when Sonic 2 was going to be a new game, there was the Hidden Palace Zone.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yes, there are pictures of that, and it's just like, oh, the Hidden Palace Zone and all kinds of things like that. And it was fairly infamous, because it's like, well, I can't find it. I don't get to it. Well, of course, it's the Hidden Palace. And so it was definitely fuel for schoolyard rumors of how do you get into the Hidden Palace Zone. You can access a little bit of it using the Game Genie way back when, but still, like, art was scrambled and it wasn't fully done. But in the iOS Android remake, it became a single act zone that it was in the Mystic Cave Zone. There was a particular spot where if you were going too fast and you didn't remember to pull on one of the handles to lower the bridge, there was no way past it, and you would inevitably die and fall into spikes.
Right.
Like there was just nothing but a deep fall. In the re-release, you fall down there, Hidden Palace Zone. And that's how you got there.
That's awesome.
So a little bit of, before Sonic Mania came out, Taxman cutting his teeth on remixing, completing, and adding. And it certainly served him very well because Sonic Mania is spectacular.
It's easily my favorite Sonic game in a very long time.
You're not alone in that.
Yeah, for sure. What's really interesting is looking at his Wikipedia page is that he's actually working on Freedom Planet 2. For those who don't know, Freedom Planet is an indie game that is very much inspired by Sonic the Hedgehog and actually started out as a Sonic the Hedgehog fan game that then got redeveloped and added with new characters and original story and became its own game. But it's definitely much inspired in the running fast platforming kind of 2D platformer genre. And though I've only played the demo, I've not played the full game, though it's on my list. Apparently for the sequel, which doesn't have a release date yet, other than sometime this year, they brought in headcanon and Christian Whitehead to work on it, which I think is really interesting. It also only currently has a release for Windows, Mac, and Linux, which I'm guessing means he's working on that version. They may be working on the console versions. But that's still really interesting to me that now he's not only working on Sonic games officially for Sega, but now is working on a game that was birthed out of the Sonic the Hedgehog style of platformer to help them too. Kind of getting this persona as the Sonic guy, which I think is pretty neat.
Well, I mean, there's plenty of franchises and titles that like they're built on the backs and stand on the shoulders of those that came before them, and that's not a mark against them. You know, sometimes we have to see how something can be done before we can make something even better, and these things develop divergently. So, before Sonic Mania, I think it had been a very long time before there was a generally favorable 2D Sonic game, officially Sonic. But that doesn't mean people can't make good run-fast platformer games.
For sure. I mean, we pretend that the 3D graphic Sonic the Hedgehog game didn't happen. That only got, I think, 2 episodes. It was supposed to be like 5, and they bombed so hard that they never finished the development on them. So we pretend those don't exist. And I will say, like, as someone who loves Sonic and has been forgiving of Sonic for a while, the 3D games are not as bad as people make them out to be. Some of them are awful, but like,
yes,
I played Sonic Forces. I bought it on the Switch on sale. For what I paid for and what I played, it was fun. It wasn't great, but I didn't hate it as much as other people did. I think, though, Sonic is always going to lend better to 2D unless you design the 3D stages to feel like the 3D stages in the middle era of 3D Sonic. I mean, like, Sonic Unleashed was a terrible game, but the best part about it were the daytime scenes where you got to run as Sonic. It's some of the best designed 3D running stages in all of Sonic. It was just paired with horrible God of War-esque terrible combat as Where Sonic, which I won't get into any further. Whereas like Sonic Mania, though, I think what gives it its strength is that it's designed and created by someone who has a love of the source material, but is also still not afraid to try new things within that framework. I mean, the design of the original stages, I think I like better than the remixes of the old stages. The old stages are great, but clearly Taxman has a vision for what an evolution of 2D Sonic is, and it was so fun to play. Even when they added new new old characters, getting to play as Mighty the Armadillo, a character I've loved since Knuckles Chaotix, which was an underrated game with a stupid mechanic, but I still, as a Knuckles fanboy, like, one of my favorite Sonic games.
I forget how much you freaking love Sonic sometimes.
Well, it's taboo to talk about these days, as everyone, it's so easy to hate on it. But in recent years, it's like I've realized guilty pleasures aren't a thing. You shouldn't feel guilty about a thing you like, even if other people don't like it. I'm campaigning for people to come see the new Sonic movie with me that I know almost nobody wants to see. But honestly, I love Ben Schwartz. I think he's a good voice choice for Sonic. And seeing Jim Carrey, one of the greatest cartoony actors of all time, finally playing a video game cartoon character, essentially. Like,
Oh, yeah.
I have to see it. But yeah, no, I'm a big Sonic nerd. And like the fact that Mighty, a character I'd known for ages and I figured everyone forgot about, got to be in this new Sonic game, no strings attached, was kind of really awesome and made me replay through the whole game again just because. And the character differences in 2D Sonics are not that big a deal, right? Like some of them have special abilities, flying, gliding, ducking to protect themselves against bullets, whatever. But like for the most part, it's run, spin, dash, jump. Like that's what you do for 90% of the characters.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still fun to have that diversity. And I really hope that we eventually do get a Sonic Mania 2 or just another original 2D Sonic game. Like hell, I would love a new Sonic game where it's 2D Sonic and a brand new Sonic character in some kind of adventure. I mean, the last new Sonic character I can think of that we got was Blaze the Cat in the what were the DS Sonic games?
Sonic Rush.
Sonic Rush, which were phenomenal 2D/3D Sonic games. Like some of my favorites on the handheld. And I like Blaze the Cat as a character who barely gets an appearance in Sonic Forces, and I feel like got shafted. Cream the Bunny also appeared in a bunch of those games and then kind of just disappeared. I think Sonic needs to do more with the original characters. I don't think there's too many of them. I think just they've not been necessarily used well. Or, hell, I'd play a whole villain game with, like, Shadow and Rouge and the robot, like, in a 2D platform. How cool would that be? You know, something like that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. Christian Whitehead, give me a call. We'll talk. I've got ideas.
Yeah. You've got the makings for your fan Sonic game.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, I don't need another project to work on. Anyone who follows me on the internet knows I already do too much.
Fair enough.
But I think this is one of the fan gamer to professional developer for an official company stories that I followed the most closely because I'm so closely tied to the source material. And he hasn't even done a ton of stuff. He's done a ton of work over the years, but like his official releases have only been within the last decade. And so I'm kind of really excited to see what more he does with Sega, but also I'd love to see a Christian Whitehead original 2D jumping, running platformer, right? Like,
yeah,
I think it would be really cool, especially if they put some twists in it that we wouldn't expect as a non-Sonic game, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see what he can make of that. And, well, I wanted to bring up a sort of interesting internal trivia bit of sort of stretching the idea of a fan game. And this is, I will admit, information that I was made aware of over the past few years watching the Games Done Quick events.
Okay.
There's been somebody running the Mega Man DOS games.
Oh, I did hear about this.
Yes. Liz Star has been at Awesome Games Done Quick this year, that at the beginning of 2020 ran the sequel, and at Summer Games Done Quick 2019 ran the original, because there were only two of them, but one of them is Mega Man, and the other one is Mega Man 3.
Oh, really?
Why that makes sense? But but the funny part is, they're not named that or called that because they have the same bosses. None of the bosses are the same. I have the list in front of me. Sonic Man, Volt Man, Dynaman, Shark Man, Bit Man, Hydro Man, Fuel Man, Sharp Man, Torch Man.
What?
Exactly. So what this was, and I feel it is germane to this conversation, because I think we need to push to next episode talking about genres created from fan games. And I do want to talk about that. But I think this episode is very much about the work of like one person or small teams to enact strange and wonderful visions. And this was the work of Steve Rosner, someone who worked for Capcom USA and was just kind of trying to figure out, can I make a Mega Man game in DOS? and was just kind of like goofing off, putting it together, trying to make it happen. And around the time that he was getting ready to leave the company for greener pastures or what have you, kind of went, "Hey, Capcom, I made this Mega Man game in DOS. I can't do anything with this if I leave the company. Do you want to release it?" And they went, "Yeah, sure. Mega Man game. Mega Man games make money. Let's do it." I don't know what the exact conversation was, but this is a fun thing to spitball on. And they certainly released it. And it is not a good game. There's a reason most people don't know about the DOS release of Mega Man. The jump button was linked to J, and the shoot button was somewhere else entirely. It was an old DOS game, so it had like at most 8 colors, and yeah,
I'm looking at screenshots of it now. It's absolutely awful from the design. Also, Mega Man is center on screen, the scrolling is from the center. Like, how do you play that? You can't see anything.
Watch the speedruns, they're amazing. Now, the fun flip side of this is Mega Man 3 has a subtitle to it. It is called Mega Man 3, The Robots Are Revolting. This started as a game that Steve Rosner was making, independent of Capcom, that was an environmental game. So most of the bosses were doing some form of pollution, and you were some kind of hero person, not Captain Planet or anything, but you were some kind of heroic entity that was seeking to clean up the environment. And through whatever negotiations, communications, things that happened, Capcom offered to release it and went, "You know what? Just make it a Mega Man game. That's fine." So whomever the main character was became Mega Man, and this all got changed up into a Mega Man game. And so now we have Mega Man 3, The Robots Are Revolting. And in a weird way, these were made within... They're made within Capcom in their own weird way, but they're sort of fan games because someone at Capcom went, "Well, I'm going to see how well this works on DOS, and I'm just going to fiddle around with this." And we got what we got.
That's wild. That's really wild. Yeah, I guess it goes to show that anyone inside or outside the industry can be fans and make games, ?
Yeah. Well, I'm re-looking up trivia about this game. This was one of the first Mega Man games where Mega Man could swim. So you know what? Ahead of its time.
Ahead of its time. I mean, heavy robots
so ahead
swimming.
Of its time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. Before we wrap up today, I actually wanted to give an update. So we talked about gaming resolutions in our last episode.
Yes.
And I had started playing Prey, the 2017 release. I realized posting about it, just writing Prey on the internet, people were like, "Oh, that game came out like a decade ago, right?" It's like, nope, same title, different game. I'm talking about the 2017 release by Arcane Studios. I have since beaten it. I finished it within the month of January.
Excellent.
Was phenomenal. If you like BioShock and want to play, dare I say, a better game than BioShock, play Prey. The 2017 release. It's pretty cheap now on PSN and on PC. Most packages come with the DLC. I highly recommend it. Whatever you think the ending of that game is, you're wrong. You will not see it coming. It's great. The story is really interesting. The character development is really interesting. It's really, really well done. I'm so glad I played it. And I think next on the docket, to keep myself honest, I'm going to try and beat a first-person game every month. Whether I keep that up or not, we'll see. But my plan for right now, for the next few months, is I'm going to buy Doom 2016. I think I'm going to buy it on the Switch just because why not? And then in March, they are releasing The Outer Worlds officially on the Switch. And to buy a Fallout-style game on the Switch is a dream come true. So I will play that in March. So that's what's upcoming as far as an update of that. I really did love Prey, though. It might have jumped into one of my top 5 games of all time. I liked it so much. Like, it was one of those games where I beat it, was kind of slack-jawed, and then immediately started a new save file. because it has a new game plus mode. So not a lot of games make me do that. So definitely worth checking out. If you have not played that game, go play it.
That's a great vote towards it. Yeah, I did finish X-Men Legends. I am working on Beautiful Joe. I got life's gotten crazy the past a little bit, but so what I'm also doing is I'm playing a bunch of games simultaneously based on where I am. Because Beautiful Joe I can only play at home, but I have a Switch and I have all sorts of other handheld things. So when I have my Switch, I'm playing Celeste, which I'm on the 4th world right now. I'm loving it. I could probably beat it a lot faster, but I want to see how many strawberries I can get. Also,
Nice.
a friend of mine is working on speedrunning the game, and I've been watching him do stuff, and it's just inspiring. So I may take a little longer with Celeste than I probably should if I'm trying to get through things. And on the longer side of things, I have Pokemon Gold in my Game Boy Color because, as mentioned before in a previous episode, I haven't beaten anything in Gen 2 and 3.
Right.
I've beaten some of everything post 4. So it's like, you know what? Let me finally beat Gold. Let me finally let me play Alpha Sapphire, and I'll do those as I travel about. So I'm on the 4th gym in Pokemon Gold. So I'm making great time on that because sometimes this time of year subways are terrible.
Oh, awful. And that reminds me, actually, on the handheld front, I am playing through Owlboy, which you lent me, which thank you very much, you and your lovely
No worries.
spouse. It is so incredibly charming. It's just such a fun game. I'm so happy I borrowed it. So that's on my list to get through, but it's not part of the first-person shooter thing.
Right.
But it's beautifully designed. Its soundtrack is great. The lead character, without saying a damn word, is one of the most charismatic characters I think I've seen in a sprite-based video game in a while, mostly because of how good the art is. So that is the portable game I'm playing right now. But if I get Doom 2016 on the Switch, that'll probably take a back seat for a bit. But yeah, I think for the rest of this year, I'd like for us to keep updating those resolutions. I think it's a fun thing that we've set for ourselves.
Agreed.
And also for the listener to check in as well on things that they're working on. People have been very interactive on Twitter and Facebook, which I'm very thankful for. And
Should we start a channel on the Discord?
Oh yeah, why don't we do that for gaming resolutions, and people can just update what they're doing there? Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I think that'd be great.
But yeah, I think that again, if you have not played Prey, please play it. Especially you, Geoff. I think it's just the right kind of mind-bending story that I think you'll really dig. And it's also got enough fiddly stuff in it that you'll want to explore it and actually get through it.
That is tempting. I'll put it on the list.
Yeah, both of our very, very long lists.
Put it in the queue. But I do know that there are a lot of fan projects that made good, fan creators that are now official, strange things made almost fan-like within official channels that we have missed. And we didn't even really get into those sorts of games that were truly one person's efforts to create a bigger game. You mentioned Owlboy, and that reminded me. I think maybe we'll talk about that soon, but we want to hear about some of your favorite fan games, some of your favorite made official fan things. Was it Street Fighter X Mega Man? which is one we completely didn't talk about, but is out there. And because the two of us can't cover all of this ground.
Nope, that's why we need your help. That's why it's a conversation.
Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I am Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.